Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Jaya Jamunatiravanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jamunatiravanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Shri Radha Damodar Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Brihvajakacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Brihvajakacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Haribo Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Devamrita Swaminita Namane Pacharkur Vrajnja Bhaktacharya Vinita Pratatapikananyam Yasasavijtenama Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminita Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyaresha Tarine Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna consciousness. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 14, Great Forest of Material Enjoyment, the material world as the Great Forest of Enjoyment, text number 40. Yadapi dig ibha jaino yajvino yevai rajarshaya kim tu param hridhe shairan asyam eva mameyam iti krita vairan hubandhayam vishujasvayam upasamhritaha. Yat api, although, dik ibha jainaha, who are victorious in all directions, yajvinaha, expert in performing great sacrifices, yea, all of whom, vai, indeed, rajarishayaha, very great saintly kings, kim tu, but param, only this earth, param, only this earth, mridhe, in battle, shairan, lying down, asyam, on this earth, eva, indeed, mama, mine, iyam, this, iti, considering in that way, krita, on which is created, vaira anubandhayam, a relationship of enmity with others, visrijya, giving up, svayam, his own life, upasamhritaha, being killed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Prabhupada Ki Jai. There were many great saints. This is Jad Bharat, still speaking to Maharaj Rahugra. There were many great saintly kings who were very expert in performing sacrificial rituals and very competent in conquering other kingdoms. Yet despite their power, they could not attain the loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is because those great kings could not even conquer the false consciousness of, I am this body and this is my property. Aham mameti. That's a big problem. Or in this verse, it's described as mama iyam. We have aham mameti or mama iyam. Thus, they simply created enmity with rival kings, fought with them, and died without having discharged life's real mission. Right? There's one for the history books. In fact, there's millions for the history books all about such people. Purport. The real mission of life for the conditioned soul is to reestablish a forgotten relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in devotional service so that he may revive Krishna consciousness after giving up the body. One doesn't have to give up his occupation as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, or whatever. In any position, while discharging his prescribed duty, one can develop Krishna consciousness simply by associating with devotees who are representatives of Krishna and who can teach this science. Regretfully, the big politicians and leaders in the material world simply create enmity and are not interested in spiritual advancement. Too true. Material advancement may be very pleasing to an ordinary man, but ultimately he is defeated because he identifies himself with the material body and considers everything related to it to be his property. This is ignorance. Actually, nothing belongs to him, not even the body. By one's karma, one gets a particular body, and if he does not utilize this body, by one's karma, one gets a particular body, and if he does not utilize his body to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all his activities are frustrated. The real purpose of life is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, Chapter 2, text number 13. Atha pumbir dvija shrestha varnashrama vibhagasha svanustitasya dharmasya samsidir hari toshanam. It really doesn't matter what activity a man engages in. If he can simply satisfy the Supreme Lord, his life is successful. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. What a really poignant, relevant purport, relevant in all ages. And as always, true to Prabhupada's form, it's just straight to the point, cutting out all the chaff and revealing to us the real meaning of life. Prabhupada is just a poet, a maestro, an artist, all in one. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in this verse, Jad Bharat is reminding Maharaj Rahugana, who is himself a Maharaja, a king, that being a king ain't all that. So many kings throughout history attained such incredible power and influence, far more than we see in our modern wannabe Rajas. And but still, despite their power, could not attain the loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, for many of those with power and with influence, with wealth, it's even harder for them to be Krishna conscious, because it's very hard to conquer the false consciousness of I am this body and this is my property. We should pity them, actually, those who are burdened with opulence, generally struggle to have this simple, affectionate feeling that they are dependent upon the Lord. Queen Kunti said this, actually. And who would know better than Queen Kunti? I mean, in her time, she saw lots of Rajas, some of them Raja Rishis, and most of them succumbing to this bodily consciousness and getting an unfortunate fate. So Queen Kunti said, I promise she said it. I can't remember the Sanskrit here. She said that, Janmaishvarya Shruta Shribir. Janmaishvarya Shruta Shribir Edamana Madapuman Naivaratya Vidatum Vai Tvam Kinchana Gocharan. Someone who has very good birth, they have Aishvarya, some opulence, some riches, some wealth. Shruta, very knowledgeable, perhaps they have a high quality education. And Shri, very beautiful. For those persons, it's very difficult for them to chant the holy names of the Lord with feeling like I am dependent upon the Lord. It's very hard for them to recognize a kinchana gocharam. I've got nothing else but Krishna. That's very hard. When you have so much, you think, it is my wealth, it is my good birth, it is my knowledge, it is my beauty, which makes me successful in life and will make me successful after life. But actually, those things can be a great burden if, because of those, they can't conquer the false consciousness of aham mameti. It's all mine, 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 mine. So we should pity. Throughout history, there have been so many powerful leaders and rulers and influencers. And although they fill the history books, our lesson to learn from them is that power, wealth, great learning, and beauty are not actually all that it's cracked up to be. That's what we're meant to learn. Actually, have you ever wondered, dear devotee friends, when you're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and frequently there are long, parts of a chapter describing this king and then that king, and then there was this person and there's that person, the son of this one is that one, and the son of that one is this one. Sometimes we think like, hey, Lord Chaitanya said every syllable of Srimad Bhagavatam is saturated with Krishna prema, and this is kind of boring, reading about this king and that king and all these lineages. Have you ever wondered why such descriptions of these lineages of kings in Srimad Bhagavatam? Well, you might recall, if you made it up to the 12th canto, that Shukadeva Goswami actually answered this question in chapter 3, text number 14. He said, I've related all these narrations of these great kings whose fame is spread throughout the world, and then they departed, they left. Shukadeva Goswami said, my real purpose was to teach transcendental knowledge and renunciation. The stories of these kings lend power and opulence to these narrations, but do not in themselves constitute the ultimate aspect of knowledge. The whole purpose of hearing about all these kings who, like some shooting star, attained some notoriety and then perished without attaining pure love of God. The whole purpose of hearing all of that is so that we can cultivate real knowledge and renunciation. That's what we're supposed to gain from this. That's exactly why Jad Bharat is saying this to Maharaj Rahugana. Look at the whole history of kings and leaders of this world. Look at it. It's not that great because they did not attain loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, some did. That's why in our Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear the lineages of kings who did not attain samsiddhiyad haritoshanam, the perfection of life, pleasing Hari. And then, of course, the Srimad Bhagavatam focuses on those great devotees who, kings or not, did attain love of God. So Shukadeva Goswami says, the whole reason you should hear about all these kings is so that you develop renunciation and real transcendental knowledge, recognizing it's not worth it to try to become some Raja in this world. It's not worth it. What do you get from that? What do you get? At best, a few thousand years later, you might have your name written in the history book somewhere or some footnote. And there was such and such king who, for some brief time, upset everybody and then died. That's all you can hope to attain. And what to speak of our modern politicians? Nobody's going out with a good track record these days. There's no more like great leaders whose reputations are unsullied. In almost all cases, one of these leaders dies and it's a celebration. We had a few significant deaths this week, actually, not the least of which is America's greatest war criminal, Henry Kissinger, who, although he wasn't the president, he wasn't quite the king, but he's probably more influential in shaping global politics than the actual elected world leaders of the time. Kissinger, who worked under, who did he work under? Reagan? Yeah. And a few other presidents. He was Secretary of State. And he's the one who kind of like the architect of this disastrous, I don't know if I should say disastrous, everyone's got an opinion, but America's foreign policy of basically butting into everybody else's politics and, stopping the rise of communist regimes and taking out certain leaders that Kissinger just decided shouldn't exist anymore. Carpet bombing Cambodia and just, coups and just like funding all these wars and all sorts of business that shouldn't have been involved in. Some argue that actually that there's like some 3 million deaths attributed to Henry Kissinger's name because of his foreign policies. And, so everyone's like celebrating his death now. Even our current president, Biden, had to come out and say, like, we have to disagree with a lot of things that he's done. So, this is what you can hope for to be a modern politician. This is what you go for. You die and everybody just celebrates. Like, thank God, this guy is gone. So Shukadeva Goswami's point is so clear. It's not worth it to become some king of this world. It's not that great. He says very explicitly, the whole point in describing all lineages of royalty is so that you can cultivate real transcendental knowledge and renunciation. That even persons with such power and opulence, they did not attain love of God. So why should you strive for that? And as Queen Kunti says, actually having such opulence, beauty, good birth, learning, these things can be an obstacle to just feeling akinchana gocharam. I have nothing but Krishna. That's our goal. That's how you attain love of God. So, Hare Krishna. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says many interesting things. One doesn't have to give up his occupation as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. In any position, while discharging his prescribed duty, one can develop Krishna consciousness simply by associating with devotees who are representatives of Krishna and who can teach this science. Herein, Srila Prabhupada, who is famously liberal, at least compared with his god brothers and with the tradition of Krishna consciousness thus far, Srila Prabhupada is famously liberal. And he's referencing a famous verse, which he often quoted, spoken by Lord Brahma. So that would be 10th canto, chapter 14, text number something, I don't know. But Lord Brahma famously says, Jnane prayasam urapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shutigatam tanuvan manavabhirya prayasho jitachitopyasi tais trilokyam. That one should just stay in their established position and follow the path of hearing and chanting about Krishna, from following the example set by real authorities and hearing and chanting about Krishna. And then you can practically conquer Krishna. Practically, prayasha, almost completely conquer Krishna. If you give up this tendency towards speculation about what is the goal of life and what is really good, trying to speculate about the absolute truth and the nature of God, everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got an idea. But if you just give that up and hear attentively and faithfully from the authorities, following in their footsteps, then you can practically conquer over Krishna, who is otherwise unconquerable. That's what Brahma says. And Brahma, he's got quite some status. And he's saying, just stay in whatever position you're in. Prabhupada ran with this philosophy that you don't have to become a this or a that. Doesn't matter what your occupation is, in any position. While discharging your prescribed duty, you can develop Krishna consciousness simply by associating with devotees who are representatives of Krishna and who can teach this science. This is significant because, in contrast, Prabhupada is saying the big politicians and leaders of the material world, they just create enmity amongst all of us. But associating with devotees who are representatives of Krishna, they don't create enmity. Rather, they cultivate love of God. This is very important for us to understand. Our modern politicians want to divide us as much as possible. They love it. Love it. When we can see ourselves as a particular bodily group, really get into the identity of your body and see a common enemy in someone else's body, they need that. They need that so that we can be manipulated to voting in a particular way or spending in a particular way or supporting a particular ideology or whatever. We're not that different, dear devotees. We're not that different from all these people killing each other over in Israel and Gaza. We're really not that different. We think, how could they do that? You're practically the same people. Or the Koreans, North Koreans and the South Koreans are kind of like restarting their wars with each other. Like exactly, from the relatively ignorant American perspective, it's like you're exactly the same people. But our politicians just love it. They love it when we can be divided and conquered. And in contrast, the devotees who are representatives of Krishna, who teach the science of Krishna, they say the exact opposite. Whatever you are, come as you are and love Krishna. That's what that verse means. Stane stita shrutikata tanavan. Come as you are. Stane stita, literally stand in your own position. Stand in your own position. Hear and chant about Krishna. Develop love of Krishna, which is the exact opposite of the enmity and envy cultivated by political leaders. This is the real revolution. This is the solution. The dissolution of our material identity and the awakening of our siddha svarupa, our samsiddhir haritoshanam, our perfection of pleasing Krishna. It's elucidated even more in this verse Prabhupada put at the end of this purport. Athapumbir dvija shreshta. Varna shrama vibhagasha, whatever you might have in varna, an ashrama, whatever position, svanushthitasya, dharmasya, samsiddhir haritoshanam. Just your perfection is if you can please Krishna. It's not like, oh, am I the best brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, shudra? Am I really perfect as a brahmachari or grihasta or vanaprastha or sannyasi? Am I doing all that really well? You're doing it well if you're pleasing Krishna. That's the perfection. Samsiddhir. Hari Toshanam just means pleasing Hari. That's the success. And that's what the devotees who know the science of Krishna, that's what they teach. That the success, the perfection is if you can just please Krishna. What a broad-minded and inclusive ideology. That's what makes Krishna consciousness different from everything else. Ours is most inclusive, at least it should be, if I may be a little critical of the conservative voices, even within our communities, just a little bit, that ours is meant to be most inclusive. What is the meaning of the statement that Prabhupada built a house in which the whole world can live? Unless we can include everybody. Does including everybody mean forcing them to conform to some new bodily concept of life? One in which you dress in a particular way, talk in a particular way, walk in a particular way? Or does inclusiveness mean whatever way that you walk, talk, or literally stand, stane stitaha, that can be offered to Krishna as well? I would say the latter. I would say the latter. And there's lots of verses to back that up, including the often quoted verse, again spoken by Shukadeva Goswami, I think, or was it Sutta Goswami, that Udaradi Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param. What is that? Tivrena Bhakti Yogena. Parapapa Tivrena Bhakti
Akama
Yogena.
Sarvakama Va.
Yes, Akama Sarvakamava. Thank you. Dasya Prema. Real brahmachari. Got brahmachari intelligence. Akama Sarvakamava Mokshakama Udaradi. Whether you got all desires or no desires or desire for liberation, whatever your desire is, even if your desire is you have a certain cultural background, tendency to do this thing or that, if you like this sort of food or you don't like that sort of food, or dressing this way or that dressing in that way, tibrena bhakti yogena, just engage in devotional service to Krishna. And one can do that if they are udharadi, broad-minded in intelligence. This is the liberal perspective, the very inclusive, very liberal perspective, authorized by Srimad Bhagavatam. No matter what someone's background, no matter what desires they've cultivated in this lifetime, if one is broad-minded, we can see how they engage in devotional. They can be engaged in devotional service with focus and attention. Stane stitaha, just standing in your own position. Just engage in hearing and chanting about Krishna. Come as you are. We don't need to require everyone to go through some sort of wild catharsis, some sort of extreme change by forcing them to eat Indian food. If it can be a little bit more straight to the point and blunt. Don't need to force everyone to eat Indian food. Some people don't like it. But sthane stita means whatever position one is in. We hear and chant about Krishna. That's the devotional service. And if I may again make just a little bit of criticism of the conservative perspective within our communities, I would say that this sort of expectation that everyone conform to some uniform dress, uniform culture of music or architecture or food or expressions of speech, this forcing everyone to conform, is not so much unlike the big politicians who will create enmity against the very people whom we are charged to save by Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana movement. If we establish an us and them, mentality, especially by superficial external symbolism, then it's very hard to save those people whom you look down upon as being different or inferior. It's very hard to be motivated to save them if you don't see them as your own brother, your own kin. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying you don't have to give up your occupation in any position. You develop Krishna consciousness simply by associating with devotees who are representatives of Krishna and who can teach this science. If it is a science, it can be applied universally. And it is a science. It is absolutely a science. More scientific, I'd say, than some of our empirical sciences, as productive as they may have been. This is a science of Krishna consciousness, and someone who's udaradi, broad-minded in their intelligence. Broad-minded, udara, like damodara. Udara means belly, but udara also means very broad, very big, and D is intelligence. Someone who's got very broad-minded intelligence, they have an inclusive perspective on how anyone can be engaged in devotional service, even if they're full of desire or have no desire, whether this occupation or that occupation, born here, born there, born anywhere. Udaradi means they find an inclusive way to engage anyone in devotional service. Prabhupada says at the end of the purport that we're reading for Srimad Bhagavatam class today, dear devotees, he says it really doesn't matter what activity a man engages in. If he can simply satisfy the Supreme Lord, his life is successful. I mean, how's that for broad-minded, udharadi? How's that for a very, very liberal perspective? I mean, Prabhupada, if there's anyone who's udharadi, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's just like, when he started meeting devotees, when devotees started to follow him in New York in the late 60s, anything that they would do, he would just encourage, oh, that's wonderful devotional service. It's just wonderful. Anything that someone would do for him, he'd just say, this is wonderful devotional service. So broad, so liberal. It really doesn't matter what activity a man engages in. If he can simply satisfy the Supreme Lord, his life is successful. Samsiddhir haritosha. That's the perfection of anything that we may do, that Krishna is pleased. And Krishna gives such a clear explanation of how he's pleased. In Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, it says one who's always hearing and chanting about him, who takes shelter of him, who calls out to him, this is very pleasing to him. It's very satisfying. One who associates with his devotees, learns the science of Krishna consciousness, and one who shares his message. He says no one is more dear than that person who shares this message with the devotees, makes them into devotees so that they can appreciate the message of Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He says no one's more dear. This is how he's pleased. So let's be a little careful. Sometimes we can propound an idea, not unlike the big politicians and leaders of the material world who create enmity. Let's not present a Krishna consciousness which creates more enmity, that we're better than everybody else, that they are so fallen because they're not dressing in the right way, eating in the right way, walking and talking in the right way. Everybody's doing it wrong except for us. Now, the only thing that we're doing right is that we're hearing and chanting about Krishna with a little love in our hearts given to us by Srila Prabhupada. He planted the seed in all of our hearts. That's the thing we're doing right. And anybody can do that. Sthani stita, no matter what position they're in, no matter what their occupation may be, no matter what their background is, no matter what detachments they may struggle with, they can all be engaged in Krishna's devotional service. If we are broad-minded in our intelligence, we can see how anybody can be engaged in devotional service. And that is the opposite of the politicians who want to divide and conquer, who thrive on the us and them mentality, who thrive on a crude bodily concept of life. They love it. That is their bread and butter. We can do a lot better than that. We have to know the science of Krishna consciousness, not just the dogma of Krishna consciousness. not just the ritualism, the routine, or even the institutionalism. We need to know the science of Krishna consciousness. That means contemplating the philosophy very deeply. As we're doing, we discuss together in Srimad Bhagavatam class. We inquire from those who are self-evident in their experience and their success in cultivating love of God and sharing it with others. This is how we know the science. It's very easy to just write down a whole list of rituals and dogmas. You can put it on a single page, one page, simplified, done. And although there may be so much benefit in that, there is a lot of benefit, of course, even if you're on the dogmatic, ritualistic phase of Krishna consciousness, there's so much benefit. But still, to really understand it as a science, to understand the great secrets of Krishna consciousness is so much more than just ritual and dogma. And that's said in another great verse, often quoted by Srila Prabhupada, spoken originally by Bhishma, right? When he says, Tarka pratishtat shrutayo vibinam, nasavrishir yasya matam napinam, dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam, mahajano yenigata sapanta. That the secret of Dharma, the real truth of Dharma, guhyam, dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam, the secret, guhayam, which is hidden in the hearts of the Mahajanas, the real truth of Dharma. It's not understood by logic, he says. Tarka apratishta. It's not founded on logic. Like, I'll just figure it out with my own brain. I'll figure out what is the science of Krishna consciousness. What is the great secret of Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. I'll just figure it out with my own brain, do the calculations. That's what I thought when I first met the devotees in New Zealand, especially when I saw my spiritual master for the first time. It's like calculating, okay, so if you just wear the saffron robes, you just got to like sit in a particular position, you say these talking, and this real, because Gurudev's got quite a confident, booming voice. And I thought there's the science to just calculating, how am I going to take over all these people here, steal their money or something. It's not just some logical computation, tarka pratishta, and shruteyo vibinam. And you can hear from so many different scriptures. Some of them, they contradict each other. Shruteyo vibinam. There's different scriptures relevant for different people at different times. You can't just fixate on something and then demonize someone whose scripture says something else. I mean, we should obviously cherish our scriptures. They're so important. They're the word of God and his devotees. But there are other scriptures which are relevant for other people at other times, even within the Vedas. Shiva Purana is relevant for people in Tamaguna, but that's not going to be our practice. But it wouldn't be appropriate for us to take something from Shiva Purana and say, oh, just see, we should eat meat and smoke ganja. That wouldn't be appropriate for us. Similarly, there are other scriptures of the world, other great religious traditions. It's appropriate for certain people, certain levels of God consciousness. Some become bewildered thinking, how can there be so many different texts? It's relevant to time, place, and circumstance in most cases. So the Dharma is not necessarily established just by, debating over every little difference in the scripture. Whose scripture is better, and we go on some holy war because our book says something slightly different about some esoteric little detail than your book. That's not how Dharma is understood. So tarka pratishta shruteyo vibinam nasavrisir yasya matam napinam. And as for the rishis of this world, the great thinkers and intellectuals, well, you can only become an intellectual and a great thinker if you disagree with everybody else. That's the prerequisite. They're just always disagreeing with everybody. Nasavrisya yasya matam napinam. This is especially true in academia. In fact, just to get a doctorate, you have to say something different than what's already been said. This is obviously not the Vedic tradition. You have to say something different. Sure, the previous, professors, they've said like this, but here's my doctorate thesis, which now says something different. You have to do that. You can't just like agree with everybody else from the past and get a degree. Can you imagine? My doctorate thesis is that I just agree with what all the previous scholars have said. The end. No, if you want to be established as a great thinker, as a rishi, you have to come up with something new, and say how everybody else is wrong. So obviously, this is not how this great science of Dharma, the science of Krishna consciousness, is understood. How is it really understood? Mahajano Yenagata Sapanta. It's hidden in the heart of the great devotees who know the science. We simply need their association. We need to hear from them, serve them, follow in their mission, the service that they give us to do. That's how we understand the science of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada enacted a spiritual science focused on hearing and chanting. And he was extremely liberal. Of course, everybody's got their perspective on Srila Prabhupada. He's at that stage where his leaving this world is so long ago that now he's an historical figure, and there's different perspectives on the history. There's a whole science of getting into histories, how you interpret a person's activities and behavior and what they were really all about. So there's many perspectives, but we can see in his books, statements like this show his liberal leanings. It really doesn't matter what activity a man engages in. If he can simply satisfy the Supreme Lord, his life is successful. That's his interpretation of the Srimad Bhagavatam verse, first canto, second chapter, text number 13. So the science of Krishna consciousness is for those who are udharadi, broad-minded. They can apply that science universally, whether it is here in America, whether it is in India, in the African continent, in Central Asia. Dear devotees, I have seen in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, the devotees chanting. Anandini went to Uzbekistan with some devotees, and they were in these very, very old temples that used to belong to the Zoroastrians. I mean, there's not really any Zoroastrianism anymore, but they have these incredible, beautiful temples. This is pre-Islam coming into Central Asia. They have these beautiful, somehow some of these temples were not destroyed, despite Islam's many conservative so-called revolutions where they like to just kind of smash things. But anyway, some of these old temples, they're preserved from Zoroastrians, and the devotees are in there, they're chanting Hare Krishna, and they're all dressed. I should show you the pictures. They're dressed in traditional Uzbek style. It's still very chaste dresses for the ladies, very beautiful traditional ornamentation, but all singing Hare Krishna. That's spiritual science in Uzbekistan. I mean, that's just remarkable. And even in China. And as I've said so many times, I guess I'm just so excited about this Abdullah in Saudi Arabia, who's actually having secret meetings with his friends in his apartments. They're chanting Hare Krishna. So that's a spiritual science. And if we just, within whatever our position is, whatever our situation, if we hear and chant about Krishna, apply that scientifically, we can practically conquer Krishna. Otherwise, we will be conquered by these many, many kings and politicians who love just to divide everybody and conquer them, who love to create enmity, who are not interested in spiritual advancement, and who simply want to use us as pawns in their own ambitions to acquire more and more and more before death ultimately takes it away. So pick your side. Do you want to be the pawn of some politician who stirs up the poisonous pot of the bodily concept of life, and who pits you against someone who might be almost identical in ethnicity or in tradition or a background, but it'll still pit you against them? Do you want to have their sangha, get all up in their modus operandi, or, as Srila Prabhupada says, associate with the devotees who are representatives of Krishna and who can teach the science of Krishna consciousness, produces an opposite result, seeing everyone as part and parcel of the Lord. Everyone is as our brothers and sisters in service of Lord Krishna. A broad-minded person can see how that's possible. Someone who's not broad-minded, maybe they think that every devotee must conform to a uniform method of bhakti. And if they don't, then they're out. I'm going to choose the very liberal perspective of Srila Prabhupada. And I wait for some constructive criticism of my choice. On that note, I'll finish. Thank you, dear devotees, for listening. Again, I just wanted to remind everyone, since some came a little late, why do we hear about all these different kings in the Srimad Bhagavatam? Why do we have to hear about all these lineages? Why does it list this person, and then their son is that person, and their son is that person? As Shukadeva Goswami says in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole point is that we develop transcendental knowledge and renunciation, detachment from any aspiration to also be some powerful king. Because, as is described in this verse, despite all their power, they could not attain the loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So let's not waste our time with those bums. Let's associate with the devotees of Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo. Any questions or comments, or additions or subtractions, or multiplications or divisions? No, everyone's fully satisfied. All right, thank you for tuning in.
Never
Tune in tomorrow.
enough.
We'll have Her Grace Parameshwari Devi Dasi on class. Oh, Hare Krishna, dear Taraka Prabhu.
Yeah, the perennial problem.
Not a problem, but you know.
Never time enough for the comments. Class is so short, we only have an hour. What can we do? There's so much to discuss.
Fortunately, we have many lifetimes to continue hearing and chanting about Krishna.
Well, that's the hope. Yeah, we've had a few discussions in the past about the issue of liberalism, and I think you have labeled me on a few occasions as conservative.
I haven't labeled you, no, Prabhu. I appreciate all your perspectives. And I'm learning from them, genuinely.
Well, I could probably be described as conservative in some regards. I don't know, I try to stick close to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was liberal in a relative sense, relative to previous acharyas. He could be described as liberal. In his time, he was generally regarded as very, very conservative by people who heard from him. And Srila Prabhupada, when they would say, you know, Allen Ginsberg, for example, when he suggested that Srila Prabhupada was very conservative, Srila Prabhupada, of course, objected and said, actually, I'm very liberal. But, you know, from Allen Ginsberg's perspective, Srila Prabhupada was conservative. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada, whether you regard him as liberal or conservative, he was a stickler for certain things. You know, he tried to be accommodating as far as possible. You mentioned the house in which the whole world can live. That was there was a an astrologer in Mayapur. Where was that? I don't remember the name of that place now. Can't remember the particular district in Mayapur. Anyway, so gosh, I can't remember anything. I had a
A house in which the whole world can live.
yeah, I had a virtually sleepless night, so
Oh, sorry to hear that, Prabhu.
I'm in a pretty foggy state. And anyway, that astrologer, when you saw Srila Prabhupada's photograph, he commented that this was the greatest spiritual personality on the earth at this time, and that he had the capacity to create a house in which the whole world could live. And when that was told to Srila Prabhupada laughed and said, Hare Krishna. And then he said, at least that is my desire. But he also made
I didn't know that someone said that directly to Prabhupada and that he agreed with it. That's really nice. Interesting.
Yeah, but
I thought it was a posthumous sort of, nicety. But if Prabhupada agreed, then it's bona fide.
Yes. Yeah, that was told to him by Bhavananda Prabhu in Denver. I think that was in 1970. I think it was his 1976 tour of the U.S. Anyway, in contrast to this, Srila Prabhupada also made a great many statements in which he expressed other ideas, that he was not interested in numbers, but more interested in quality. Many, many instances of him talking about, just one moon. If I could, he wanted quality over quantity for sure. No question about that. He said as such many, many times, more interested in quality than quantity. And his instruction to managers was that we should be selective about it, at least with regards to, who we accommodate in our temples, we should be very selective. He wanted to maintain a certain standard of consciousness. He didn't want that to be compromised by individuals who were of lesser quality. He wanted a certain standard maintained. And so you speak of perspectives. There are many perspectives. I try to cultivate a broad perspective. I try to understand everything that I can about Srila Prabhupada and not be myopic about my perception of him. But I study his words extensively and have, for some time. And my understanding of his views is expanding all the time. I learn more and more about his views as time progresses. I understand more of what he has said. I hear more. I've read everything, I've heard everything, but it doesn't all sink in. And over the course of time, gradually, something clicks for me, and I suddenly realize, he said this or that. Anyway, so there were things that he specifically asked for. There were, he definitely gave us a set of parameters to work within. Not that it, was just a complete free for all that we could limitlessly, unrestrictedly exercise our independent creative ability and just, do whatever seemed like the thing to do at the time. He did give us some parameters. And, everyone's familiar with the most basic parameters, the relative principles and 16 rounds and so on. But many others he gave as well. And sometimes some will argue, well, this or that, it's not, these may be secondary instructions or, not one of the major limbs of bhakti. And but, for a disciple of Srila Prabhupada or any follower of Srila Prabhupada, really, when you hear Srila Prabhupada express his desire to you directly, this is what I want. How can you disregard that? How if you haven't heard it from him directly, then you can speculate on what to do or what not to do. But when you hear Krishna's own emissary telling you this is what I want, you can't disregard it. You spoke about the primacy of pleasing Krishna, and our approach to pleasing Krishna, of course, is that we please Krishna by pleasing his devotee. Where is it? Padma Purana, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, and he says, one who claims to be my devotee is not my devotee, but he who claims to be the devotee of my devotee is actually my devotee. And that's our process, Lord Chaitanya famously described this, Dasa Anudas. So our approach to pleasing Krishna, because Krishna is not so easy to approach directly. Of course, he made approach to him easy by chanting of the holy names, but it's otherwise not so easy to approach Krishna. But Krishna's devotee is easy to approach, and we can. Srila Prabhupada explains innumerable times that the way to please Krishna is by pleasing his devotee. It's easy to please his devotee. Krishna is not so easy to please. And so when Krishna's devotee asks for something, how can we neglect that? So I hear with some frequency, quite regularly, individuals will express the idea that this or that devotee is very conservative, and why are certain devotees always applying the brakes? Why can't we be more liberal and accommodating and so on? And I think the answer is that some of us have heard directly from Srila Prabhupada what he wants specifically, and we're trying to honor that. When you hear from Srila Prabhupada innumerable times that the dress of a devotee is, and he didn't say, a dhoti or a kurta, although he really, really, really liked for us to wear a dhoti and kurta. He really appreciated that. That pleased him tremendously. And so we all did it because it made Srila Prabhupada extremely happy. But he didn't insist on it. Sometimes he said it was mandatory for brahmacharis, and he many times said it was mandatory for sannyasis, but not for householders. But the things that he always insisted on and did not bend on, except in the most extreme circumstances, such as devotees preaching in Pakistan or some such thing at Gargamuni and Brahmananda preaching in Pakistan under very dangerous circumstances. So he allowed for them, you don't have to appear overtly as a Vaishnava, but he explained that Vaishnava dress, the essential dress of a Vaishnava is he must have a Sika, must have Kanti Mala, and must have tilak, must have Vaishnava tilak. Those things he insisted upon all the time, and he was unyielding on this. He insisted, and even there was one famous example. There was one military officer who was taking to Krishna consciousness, and the rules of the military were, very strict. You had to make a certain appearance, and so he asked Srila Prabhupada, do I have to do this because it could cost me my my job. They won't hold still for this. And Srila Prabhupada would not bend. He insisted, no, you must have Sika, Kantimala, and Tilak. And if you do this, they will understand. If they don't understand, then what can be done? But you must do this. He was just unyielding. Other acharyas also pressed this, and Lord Chaitanya himself. Srila Prabhupada would never tolerate a devotee going without tilak. In certain circumstances, when it was dangerous, maybe a devotee's life would be jeopardized by having tilak, preaching in Muslim countries and so on. Srila Prabhupada said, so then you apply very faint tilak or at least rock bottom minimum water tilak. At least you apply water tilak, but you have to apply tilak. Under no circumstances do you not go through the process of applying tilak to 12 parts of your body. If you have to, you do it with water, but you must do it. That was his position. Lord Chaitanya wouldn't tolerate his disciples being without tilak, and Srila Prabhupada also. He would, immediately if someone was without tilak, he would send them to get their tilak, whatever the circumstances were. Everything would stop. He would send them out of the room. Go apply tilak immediately. He just that was just a hard and fast rule with Srila Prabhupada. So these days, lots of devotees who didn't experience that with Srila Prabhupada have various opinions on these things. They think, well, it's this is adjustable. This is something that we could change, but Srila Prabhupada didn't feel that way. And so how can we, if you're a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, you're going to be a lover of Srila Prabhupada, and you've heard this from him innumerable times, how can you neglect it?
I could answer that for you if you're.
Well, I'm speaking.
I don't know how much time we have to get into a debate, but
yeah, I'm speaking of myself, and my god siblings, that how can we neglect the instructions of our spiritual master? So, I'm explaining why, we sometimes are ourselves unyielding about certain things that, we've heard this or that instruction from Srila Prabhupada, and it pains us to see a break in the continuity. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Fire away. I'm all ears.
Just in brief, because we're way over time, but we read statements like this in Bhagavatam, where Prabhupada's saying any activity a man does can be engaged. What does he say here? It really doesn't matter what activity a man engages in. Read in the nectar of devotion. how some things are a principle and how some things are a detail. Prabhupada put a certain perspective in his books. And, we hear from devotees that he was saying this and that so many times, but it always just comes back to me that if it were the most important principle, it would have been put in the books. But we don't see a lot in the books about adopting a certain cultural shell upon the practice of Krishna consciousness. We just don't see that emphasized anywhere. And I think that's why many devotees, myself included, therefore conclude that it is not essential.
You have not seen the statements in the books about tilak? And
Yeah, I've seen about, you're absolutely
Kan-
right about tilak and sika.
Kantimala and
No, I'm not
Sika.
disagreeing there. We're
Those,
talking specifically about
those things are all
clothing,
there.
about architecture, about Indian style music, food, dress.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
I,
even just as we're discussing with this verse, stani stitaha, that people need to conform to some particular like occupation in service to Krishna, but that
yeah,
anyone from any culture could be engaged in service, like in Uzbekistan, where they're in an old Zoroastrian temple dressed in traditional Uzbek dress, chanting Hare Krishna.
yeah.
That seems to
I
be what's there in the books.
I agree with you,
Oh, good.
but I'm saying that there are some things, and you'll find them in the books that
About what, Dodi?
no, not necessarily Dodi. Dodi is not one of those things. Srila Prabhupada was not insistent about Dodis. He definitely preferred that we dress that way, and he gave us a whole bunch of reasons why. He explained his thought process. He was really into it. And I always wear a dhoti, at least for Vaishnava functions. I hate dhotis. I've been wearing a dhoti for 50 years. I hate it.
Join the club.
But I do it because Srila Prabhupada liked it. I do it for Srila Prabhupada. I would do anything for Srila Prabhupada, even wear a dhoti. And I really don't like it. Not because of the appearance. I just I find it uncomfortable. I trip over them, and it's troublesome for me to put on. I just I just find it troublesome. I don't care for it. But I'll accept all kinds of trouble for Srila Prabhupada. So Dodis is not an example, but Srila Prabhupada was absolutely insistent upon Sika, Kantimala, and Tilak. Those things he insisted were non-negotiable. That was something that absolutely must be there, and you will find that repeated again and again in the books and Srila Prabhupada's lectures and conversations. It's all over the place. Lord Chaitanya, you'll find it in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta goes on at length about this and is very heavy about it, as was Lord Chaitanya, who would send his students home if they showed up without tilak. It's that's something that's absolutely in Shastra. But yes, lots of other things are adjustable, and they can be adjusted, and when the situation warrants it, they certainly should be adjusted, and we just don't care because there's more important things. But when the founder Acharya insists upon something, then I think we have an obligation. That's my opinion. Anyway, we've gone way over time, so I'll just pipe down.
To be continued.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. I do appreciate you bringing us back down to planet Earth with your commitment to Srila Prabhupada's tradition. I do appreciate that. But we should definitely finish because my kids are stirring, which means I've got another duty besides just hearing and chanting about Krishna. So thank you, dear devotees, for being here. Tune in tomorrow. Parameshwari Devi Dasi will be here for Srimad Bhagavatam class. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Haribo.